Let's talk about two more running backs here. Guys that are back-to-back in a lot of rankings that I'm seeing both this week, season long. Guys in very different situations, but are, for all intents and purposes, operating as these every down running backs. Well, we'll see. We'll get into it here. It's James Robinson and Ronald Jones. And I wanted to pose the question for you. I thought it'd be a fun one for us to get into. Who would you rather have rest of season? James Robinson with the Jacksonville Jaguars or Ronald Jones on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Oh, man, you're doing this to me. This one's really, really tough. I'm biased. Wow, this is tough. I'm going Ronald Jones. He's hot right now. I got to go Ronald Jones, and it's close. I mean, if I was going to rank these guys rest of season, I think they'd both be right there around the 12, 13, 14 number just because Robinson obviously is very involved in the passing game in Jacksonville, and he is that main back. But Ronald Jones, man, he's shown a ton of upside. He's finally getting going in this Tampa Bay offense. 3 straight 100-yard rushing games. Actually 5th in the NFL right now in rushing yards, more rushing yards than Zeke. We saw the touchdown upside this past week in a good offense when he got the goal line opportunities, and Mike Evans wasn't getting these 1-yard screen passes on the goal line. So in my opinion, yes, I know McCoy is involved in the passing game. I know Leonard Fournette's going to be coming back into the fold. But Ronald Jones right now is absolutely on fire, and I know Bruce Arians likes to go back and forth with his backs, but if you look at this backfield, the hot hand is clearly Ronald Jones. If he keeps getting 20 touches a game on the ground with that touchdown upside, running as good as he's been running, he's had a breakaway run, it feels like every single game for like 25, 30 yards, which is awesome. And no, he's not as involved in the passing game as James Robinson is, but he's still getting a handful of targets each and every game. It's not like he's a Marlon Mack from last season where he got like 14 targets on the whole season. I mean, Ronald Jones on the year, 25 targets in 6 games. That's 4 per game. That's not bad at all. So I think Ronald Jones actually provides a little bit of a floor in the passing game as well. Give me Rojo, man. It's been awesome to see him still thrive with Fournette coming in there because you and I both know, and anyone who's been listening knows, that I've been on the Rojo hype train for a long, long time.
It's true. It's true. And it's those investments in draft season are finally paying off for you. It's crazy because between these two players, they're both top 12 right now in PPR leagues. Both are right around 90 carries. Ronald Jones actually has a few more, 97 carries to James Robinson's 85, but both are about even. Both are at 26 and 25 targets respectively for each of them. So they're almost seeing the same volume. It's just which offense do you really want? Which offense is going to have better matchups? Part of me does want to say James Robinson in this scenario, and the only reason is because right now the Jacksonville Jaguars defense is giving up the 8th most points per game. So I think season long there's going to be more passing volume for James Robinson compared to Ronald Jones, where I think the upside for Ronald Jones and what you're banking on is the touchdowns. We saw him with 2 touchdowns in week 6, and we said preseason that Ronald Jones is one of these running backs that has double-digit touchdown upside, and if he does hit that double-digit touchdown mark, he is going to beat James Robinson, but you still have LaShawn McCoy fighting for pass-catching work, Keyshawn Vaughn coming in. Maybe, we'll see. I think there's an injury with Fournette that they're just not disclosing at this point, probably because he's in a contract year, probably doesn't want it to get out that he's a little bit more banged up than we probably think. He was a late inactive in week 6. I think Fournette is still going to try to come in and get some volume at some point. But at this point, I'm willing to say Ronald Jones is the guy there. But I still remains to be seen. Fournette's kind of this lurking monster in the shadows that could come out week 9, 10, 11, 12. Things are going to change over time. Whereas James Robinson, looks like Raquel Armstead is going to stay on the COVID hour list for probably the rest of the season at this point. And then we have Chris Thompson getting in there in garbage time situations, pass catching back. But I'm willing to look at Robinson because I think the game scripts are going to allow him to have more sustained pass catching volume. Whereas with Ronald Jones, you look at the Buccaneers defense, they're a top 8 team in terms of points allowed on the defensive side of the ball. They absolutely destroyed the Green Bay Packers. I don't think anyone saw that coming. That's the difference maker for me. It's just those defenses, but I'd love to have either of these guys as RB2s. At this point, they're both every week starters until we see otherwise.
Steph, and one more thing I want to say, in my film room I did on Ronald Jones before the season, check that out on our channel if you haven't already seen it. I highlighted how Rojo, people didn't realize how he had this big play, breakaway run potential. And no, they don't always go for touchdowns because he doesn't have that breakaway speed, but he's just making something out of nothing time and time again. He's third right now in the NFL in runs of 20 or more yards, behind only Nick Chubb and Lamar Jackson. So Rojo's getting going. We're seeing those big plays. He's grinding, 4.9 yards a carry so far this season. And it's been awesome to see him come on. Really awesome for me too, just because I was so on Ronald Jones for the season. And Steph, I did convince my wife to draft Ronald Jones, and thank goodness he's gotten going these last 3 weeks. Otherwise, this marriage would have started out on a tough note. But luckily, Rojo's been getting going. Things are great, and starting off on the right foot. She's crushing it in her fantasy league too. So all good. Thank you, Rojo. Please keep it up.
4.8 yards per carry for Ronald Jones, 4.2 for James Robinson. And here's the last thing I'll say. We've seen it in Gardner Minshew's tendencies to target the running back position. He did it back when he was in college, and he's still doing it now. We saw Leonard Fournette have 100 targets last year. I think that type of receiving volume upside is there for James Robinson, and they've shown him to be the guy. So that's where the difference maker for is like in those defenses, in that pass catching volume. But again, either one would love to have as an RB2 here.